Straight away, we knew this was going to be a big job and that media interest would be intense, not just in our state but across the country. But we could never have estimated at that moment how big it would become.
There's been a strong response to appeals for public help in solving the shocking Wanaka suitcase murder.
Major crime detectives hoping to uncover a clue as to who the young murder victim was.
The victim is most likely a little girl. You can't have a child go missing in Australia and no one notice.
The investigators naturally form the belief that something has also happened to the mother.
Police say they won't draw any conclusions about human remains found in the Belanglo State Forest.
This was Ivan Milat's chosen killing field.
This was a case that had crossed 3 state lines. This is the kind of person who, for 5 years, thought he'd gotten away with murder.
I'm Des Bray, and I'm the officer in charge of Major Crime Investigation Branch within the South Australian Police. So basically our branch has responsibility for the investigation of all homicides and deaths in custody in South Australia.
On July 15th, 2015, I was in my office
When I got a call from our investigators to say that the remains of an infant had been found in a suitcase alongside the highway in South Australia, about 128 kilometres east of Adelaide. Some young people had been driving down the road and seen it. And they saw what they thought were human remains, and they contacted the police. Wanaka's a very small town in South Australia's sheep and grain farming region. It has a population of only around about 100 people. I quickly secured a car and drove to the scene with Detective Sergeant Paul Ward. By the time we got there, the scene had been shut down. So perimeters had been set up to exclude people. It was clear that the human remains were many years old, but we had no idea how long they'd been in the suitcase. That's the Lanza suitcase that we saw on the side of the road. At the time it looked grey, like in the photo. However, in reality it had been a black suitcase, and with years and years exposed to the weather, it had turned grey. Our forensic response investigators set up a tent and during the course of the night gradually removed the contents piece by piece and, as best they could, reconstruct a skeleton in that tent. We now know that the child is between about 2 and 7 years.
Major crime detectives joined by other police and SES volunteers as they scoured scrublands, hoping to uncover a clue as to who the young murder victim was.
It was right in the open and easily able to be seen.
And it had been seen by locals and other passers-by. Some had stopped to look at the case,
but we had no evidence that anybody had ever opened it.
Initially it was concerning because we had such a young child and nobody had reported the child missing. The initial theory we had was there were a number of possibilities. Firstly, the mother of the child was involved in the child's death, or that the child hadn't been reported missing because the mother was dead herself.
So it could be a male partner who had murdered both the child and the mum. But all of the investigation team and myself were firmly of the view that we would find who this little child was. Because you just can't go missing. You can't have a child go missing in Australia and no one notice. Obviously, once we had the remains, we wanted to know whether it was a little boy or a little girl. We thought we would be able to readily extract DNA, but that was a process that took many, many weeks and many failed attempts, because for children of that age, it's very difficult when they're exposed to the elements like that. We were fearful at one point that we might not actually get a DNA sample that could be analysed. One thing we knew, but we would never reveal to the public, was that the child had been subject to an unspeakable death.
It really hit home at that point the significant murder that this was.
Young children just don't disappear without people noticing. Yeah. Someone must have missed this child. One lead we had to work with was the clothing found with the child's body in the suitcase. It appeared most likely to be worn by a young girl. And while there were issues with the fibres being degraded, a few things stood out to us. There were two dresses, a pink one and a distinctive black one, which had survived for years more or less intact. There was also a homemade quilt in the suitcase.
Very small fragment remaining with what looked like some teddy bears.
We went to quilt makers and quilting associations, and we found out that that quilt would be difficult to make for a novice and most likely an older person. So that immediately told us that somebody that made that quilt and went to that effort really loved that child. We thought if we could recreate the quilt and publicise that, somebody out there would be able to identify that quilt.
Detectives hope new pictures released today will provide much-needed leads in the baffling suitcase murder investigation.
A mannequin dressed in a blonde wig and a distinctive black dress. It's the haunting figure now at the centre of a gruesome Murray Mallee mystery.
The victim is most likely a little girl, 2 to 4 years of age, who would be about this size.
Detectives desperate to hear from anyone who recognises the bag or these girls' clothes found inside it. A dress, a shoe, shorts and t-shirts among the items. Police hope this display will trigger someone's memory.
That strategy brought about, ultimately, caller 1267.
Caller 1267, it's a number that's etched in my mind. That was an amazing moment when I got a phone call that Crime Stoppers had received a call.
The pink dress, which was the subject of the call, as well as the quilt, and caller 1267 contacted Crime Stoppers to state that friends of hers, Carly and Candice, had not been seen for over 7 years.
The victim is most likely a little girl, 2 to 4 years of age.
Tanya Webber had called Crime Stoppers on that day to state that friends of hers, Carly and Candice, had not been seen for over 7 years.
It was your call that helped police unlock this mystery.
Yeah.
You were the breakthrough that they needed.
Yeah. I'm glad I called. Really glad I'm called. Yeah.
She was the call that they had been waiting for. In many ways, had been waiting 5 years for.
Carly.
Tanya Webber was a close friend of Carly Pearce Stevenson's mother. And I met her when we were filming a 60-minute story.
Carly Pearce Stevenson grew up in Alice Springs surrounded by loving family. It was the perfect place for the 20-year-old single mum to raise her 2-year-old daughter Candice, or Candles as she was affectionately known.
So when Tanya Webber saw the police appeal to help try and identify the remains of this young girl, she noticed something familiar.
My husband walked through the door and I said, oh, this could be Candles.
After identifying the pink dress and the quilt as belonging to Candice, Tanya Webber then provided photos to us that would unlock the case. This photograph shows Candice in the pram, and it's an earlier shot of her, but importantly it's got the quilt behind her used as cushioning, and you can see the distinctive musical notes that were around the edge of that quilt. In the later photograph you see Candice wearing a little pink dress. We had no doubt, as a result of receiving those photos, that it would be Candice, but it was just too early to confirm that without proof. The proof we needed came on October 12th, 2015. Using medical records obtained from Adelaide, we were able to finally identify the body in the suitcase as being Candice Kiara Pearce.
Candice, 2.5 years old at the time of her death, a little blonde child who had the rest of her life ahead of her, but it was cut short. Candice had left Alice Springs with her mother, Carly, and had not been seen by friends or family since 2008. And so the investigators naturally formed an assumption or a belief that something has also happened to the mother. The mother of a 2-year-old child wouldn't generally leave the child alone to end up the way she did. Victimology is a big part of detective work, and South Australia Police commenced a victimology profile of Carly. And through that victimology, they identified that she'd been associating with and travelling with a fellow named Daniel Marshall. He used more than one name throughout his life. I know him as Daniel Holdham from my investigations.
I remember talking to Tanya about when Carly first met Daniel. I think they knew him as Daniel Marshall back then, but Tanya didn't like him. He was, well, he was much older than Carly. There was something about him, Tanya said to me, that just irked her. She just felt uncomfortable in his presence. Tanya resented the fact that this older man, this unfriendly man, had come into Carly's life and almost brainwashed her. You know, he had found a vulnerability in Carly and exploited it. She was packing up her life, packing up everything she'd ever known and taking her 2-year-old daughter with her to start a new life with this mysterious man who no one liked, who everyone had a bad feeling about. How long was it before you next heard from Carly?
About a week or a week and a half after she left. She rang me up. She was crying. She just said to me that she thought she'd fucked up. She wanted to come home by the sounds of things. And I said, well, I can book a flight, I can pay for a flight, do you have money? No, you know, it's okay. And by the end of the conversation, she was sort of back to her giggly laughing self. So I didn't think too much more of it.
That was the last time you heard from Carly?
Yeah.
Carly's mother had been in contact with Carly. She had had last contact with Carly through phone calls in 2008 and received some messages from Carly via SMS in 2009. After those SMS communications ceased, she reported Carly as missing person in 2009.
We found out that Carly had been reported missing in 2009 in the Northern Territory. Candice hadn't been reported as a missing person because Carly was the person the report was made out to, and although it mentioned she was with Candice, Candice didn't appear on any databases as a missing person. What we learned from Northern Territory was that they'd made contact with Daniel Holdham, and he had said that she'd left and gone to Queensland.
Not long after that, her family received a text message from Carly's phone saying that she was okay. So in their mind, Carly was still alive. They reported that to the Northern Territory Police, and that was enough for police to pull Carly's missing persons report from their database. Carly's bank cards were still being accessed. Money was still being withdrawn from her accounts. In the minds of police at the time in Northern Territory, Carly was alive and well.
As the investigation progressed, that information was reviewed, and it was established that the contacts in 2009 from Carly via SMS were not Carly at all.
When the remains in the suitcase were identified as 2-year-old Candice, the next step was to find her mother Carly. The two had left Alice Springs with Daniel Holdom in 2008. Even though texts had been sent to family and friends, seemingly from Carly, she had not been seen for nearly 7 years.
Good evening. Police say they won't draw any conclusions about human remains found in the Belanglo State Forest. The bones were found by trail bike riders, and the homicide squad has been on the scene all day.
On the 29th of August 2010, some trail bike riders riding through the Belanglo Forest took a break from their riding for a short comfort stop, and one of the gentlemen that were riding the trail bikes located some remains lying beside a large tree. They were skeletal remains on the forest floor, and they were remains that were scattered across about a 60 square metre area. Once the gentleman reported the matter to police and the State Homicide Squad responded, Strikeforce Hickson was commenced. The discovery of bones in the Belanglo Forest obviously drew an inference to Ivan Milat.
It may be coincidence, but this was Ivan Milat's chosen killing field. The sign by the road with an eerie message: please be careful.
In addition to Ivan Milat, his nephew had also committed a murder in the Belanglo Forest. And so those two lines of inquiry were prolific for the initial investigation team.
Police still don't know who the victim is, but they say the bones are those of a young woman aged between 15 and 25. Investigators have one vital clue, a piece of clothing found with the bones, which they hope will help them identify this young woman.
I remember back in 2010 first hearing about the Angel of Belanglo. She was given that name because of a t-shirt that was found, basically discarded, on the side of a track that was discovered by a few dirt bike riders. And you just automatically feel for the family who doesn't have answers, right? Because this person didn't have an identity. They were just bones at that point. They were simply remains and a t-shirt discarded on the side of a track.
Some of the lines of inquiry that Strikeforce Hickson pursued were a detailed crime scene examination, looking into all the things and artefacts discovered at the crime scene within the forest, DNA and forensic procedures. They utilised a facial approximation process where the skull that was recovered was recreated into a facial image, and that was circulated across the media. They reached out to the Australian Dental Association through the Australian Dental Journal to try and identify the remains through the teeth that were recovered at the crime scene.
The victim is most likely a little girl. After our public appeal for information regarding the suitcase remains, Tanya Webber called Crime Stoppers to say she believed that Candice was the victim. Before DNA testing confirmed she was correct, investigators from Task Force Mallee started looking for Candice's mother, Carly. She was no longer registered as a missing person, even though she hadn't been seen since 2008. We established that Carly and Candice were last seen in Canberra in December 2008. That was just a 2-hour drive from where the Angel of Belanglo was found in 2010. Could Carly be the Angel of Belanglo?
So once the DNA of Candice had been confirmed by our State Forensic Science Centre, I made a call to Sydney Homicide and asked them if it would be worth running the DNA results from Candice against the body in the Belanglo forest. I thought it was a long shot, but we thought it was a shot we needed to take. New South Wales Police were fantastic. They got on board. Forensic Science in South Australia ran the DNA.
The Belanglo Angel was positively identified forensically through medical records. Carly Pearce Stevenson, Candice's mother.
A significant day in the investigation. To find out that we had 2 murders 1,100 kilometres apart, years and years apart, were linked, was unbelievable. And it supported the original thought we had on the day that Candice wasn't reported missing because her mother was dead.
The key people for us in New South Wales was Detective Superintendent Mick Willing, Detective Inspector Jason Dickinson, and Detective Sergeant Darren Gunn. We were in contact with them constantly, regardless of where we were.
My name is Jason Dickinson. I'm a Detective Superintendent of the New South Wales Police Force. In 2015, I was a Detective Inspector attached to the Homicide Squad. When the link between the 2 cases was identified, we moved very quickly, and from that point on it was about coordinating our effort, identifying what was known by both investigations, where our gaps were, and it was then a case of formulating our strategies going forward so that we were working collectively and that we were coordinating our effort.
The major factor was that they hadn't been seen for over 7 years, which meant the suspect or suspects were 7 years ahead of us.
Now, the question was, who was responsible? The evidence and victimology pointed to one suspect, Carly's boyfriend, Daniel Holdham. And we didn't have to look too hard to find him.
When police located Daniel Holdham, he was already in prison. He was already serving time for the sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl. This is the kind of person we're talking about. This was the kind of person who had a track record for abusing and preying on young, vulnerable women and girls. This is the kind of person who, for 5 years, thought he'd gotten away with murder.
South Australia Police quickly established that Holdham was in custody in New South Wales. So they had to investigate his association and history with Carly to progress further.
Since 2014, Holdham had been in Cessnock Jail serving a 4-year sentence. What we needed to establish was his whereabouts in the days following the last known sighting of Carly and Candice in Canberra in December 2008. So basically we sought to identify anybody associated with Carly and with Daniel Holdham. We knew Daniel Holdham had been with Carly for a period of time. We started building profiles on everybody to look at who we would have to speak to, and it was decided that that would be done simultaneously across the country. The date we picked was the 21st of October 2015. The most important, as we saw it, was the interview of a key suspect, Daniel Holdom. He was taken to the Cessnock police station for interview.
In the preparation for our interview with Holdom, Detective Huppatz and I established that should Holdom be prepared to talk to us about the matter, we would seek to establish his association with Carly and the history of their movements throughout Australia in the time that they were together. We were prepared to listen to his version and his story about what had taken place whilst he and Carly were together. So for the 7 hours and 24 minutes the interview took, Holdom did talk to us, and he talked to us a lot. He talked to us about his relationship with Carly. He talked about the last time he saw Carly. He talked about Carly leaving him and then him returning to South Australia after living in the ACT. He was prepared to talk a lot, but he denied being involved in their murders. Categorically denied being involved in their murders. On the 21st of October, there was a lot going on away from Cessnock. There was witnesses being spoken to. When the South Australian Police were speaking with his former partner, Hazel Passmore, she provided information to them about Holdom's involvement in the murders of Carly and Candice. That included the existence of photographs which were potentially connected to the crime.
On October the 22nd, a relative of Holdom's partner, Hazel Passmore, walked into the police station and handed the SD card to detectives. When that SD card was handed in, everybody was shocked at the contents of it. And it was clearly evident from those photographs that Carly was dead, and there was terrible photos of her remains being defiled.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a picture of Hazel Passmore, who was the partner of Daniel Holdom in 2008. In about September 2008, she was with Holdom, travelling in a vehicle with 3 kids. Holdom was driving, the vehicle rolled, and unfortunately 2 of Hazel's children died at the scene. And she herself was trapped for a number of hours in the vehicle. As a result of that, she lost a leg.
And it was while Hazel Passmore was in hospital that Holdom commenced his relationship with Carly. Hazel Passmore became prolific in this investigation.
It was very clear that Hazel and Holdom had a relationship, I think, that can be best described as perverse in many ways. They shared some dark secrets. When Carly died, Holdom recommenced his relationship with Hazel Passmore. It appears for the following year or year and a half, that Holden kept Carly's phone active. He took on her social security identity, and through that process defrauded large sums of money under Carly's name.
But it wasn't the revelations of their perverse relationship or the confirmation of the social security fraud which stunned us.
It was clear to us that Hazel had seen those photos of Carly, didn't notify the police, and kept those to herself.
Hazel told us she'd given the SD card to a relative in 2012, telling her to keep it in case anything ever happened to her. She said she was fearful of what Holden was capable of. Once we got it, our team began the arduous process of forensically examining every aspect of its contents, including photos of Carly's murder scene. Yeah, this is a really important photo and was critical to the success of the investigation. It's a zoomed-in photograph of a forearm of Daniel Holden. We know it's Daniel Holden because on that photograph you can see 2 moles that were on his arm, and that photograph had him and Carly in the photograph at the same time. I won't talk about the other photos because they're too graphic and too disturbing. There was one series of photographs important to the investigation I can talk about. The SD card contained photographs of Holden attending an event at a school in Alice Springs following the death of Hazel's children. And it was a memorial, if you like, that was put on by the school, and Holden went back for that, and he's photographed with the classmates of the deceased children and the school teacher. One of our detectives, upon reviewing all the photographs and looking at the metadata, realised that the metadata and the time clock for all the photos was significantly out of time by many years. When he saw this photo, he identified there was a faint image of a watch being worn by a school teacher. So he contacted the school, identified the date of this, and was able to identify the exact time this photograph was taken. And he was able to use that to adjust the timings on the metadata, not just for this photo, but every photo on the SD card. And that meant that we could put Daniel Holden in Belanglo Forest at the critical time when Carly was killed, and could also put Daniel Holden in Wanaka, where the lifeless body of Carly's daughter Candice was dumped in a suitcase. An amazing piece of work. Further to the metadata breakthrough, Hazel Passmore recalled a conversation she'd had with Daniel Holden regarding the murder of 2-year-old Candice.
Partway through Hazel's interview, she described graphically the murder of Candice and what she had been told by Holden.
We began to feel quietly confident we were not only pursuing the right perpetrator, but the evidence was mounting against him. We had the confessions that he'd made to a number of people, including a person in Canberra, to Passmore. We had cell tower movements that supported the fact that he'd gone to Belanglo. We had the photographs. We had him identified as being in the forest with her body. We had the moles. We had the purchase of the duct tape and the cloth that was used in her murder. The Lancer bag. Yeah, we just had an enormous amount of evidence. The only thing we didn't have was the truth from Holden.
On the 28th of October, I received a notification from Correctives New South Wales that Holden wanted to speak to us. And we were really excited that he may be going to tell us about his involvement in the murders of Carly and Candice. We commenced the interview with him, and Holden produced a 7-page document consisting of handwritten notes. And in doing so, implicated his cousin, Derek Dover, and his partner, Christine. It was a self-serving process for Holdom, who had no intention of admitting his involvement in the murders of Carly and Candice. Daniel Holdom gave 3 accounts of what happened to Carly and Candice. His first version on the 21st of October, his second version on the 28th of October, and then a version he provided to a psychiatrist in pre-sentence screening for the Supreme Court. Every version's different. I have difficulty believing anything that Daniel Holdom says. I believe he's a pathological liar.
By October 28th, we were confident that Holdom had killed the mother and child. However, there was a question mark over where he ended the toddler's life. It may have been in New South Wales, or it may have been in South Australia. While we put more work into that, we decided to only charge him for Carly's murder.
It was at that point I arrested him for her murder.
Tonight, a 41-year-old man is behind bars, accused of murdering young mother Carly Pearce-Stevenson.
The face of an alleged killer, a man police say did the unthinkable, Daniel Holdom. He's charged with murdering 20-year-old mother Carly Pearce-Stevenson and dumping her body in Belanglo Forest. He has not been charged with murdering Carly's 2-year-old daughter Candice.
We still didn't know where Candice had been murdered.
Ultimately, we were able to conclude that Daniel Holdom had taken young Candice hostage after killing her mother at Belanglo. He then kept the 2-year-old as his prisoner for 4 days until he arrived at the Riverina town of Narrandera, where he checked into a motel. He killed Candice there, and that he then continued from there through New South Wales into South Australia, through the Riverland, and once he reached Wanaka, he disposed of Candice in a suitcase on the side of the road. We could have had trials in both New South Wales and South Australia. Would have been particularly cruel to subject the family to 2 trials, possibly many, many, many years apart. So the decision was made, the right thing to do was for us to relinquish control of the investigation and transfer the leadership role of the investigation to New South Wales Police.
Now that we charged Holdom for both Carly and Candice's murders, the matter was going to proceed to court. Ultimately, through the work of the DPP Crown Prosecutor, Holdom offered 2 pleas of guilty to both counts of murder in July 2018.
This news came as a relief, as we expected a liar like Holdom taking us through a drawn-out criminal trial in the Supreme Court.
It meant that all the witnesses that would have to come to a criminal trial would no longer be needing to go through that arduous process. And it meant that he'd acknowledged finally his involvement in the murders of Carly and Candice, something which he failed to do in our interviews.
But Holdom wasn't done toying with us. On the last day of his sentencing, he tried to change his plea on the murder of Candice to not guilty. Justice Robert Hume was having none of it. And on November 30th, 2018, Holdom's sentence was finally delivered.
The judge described Daniel Holdom's actions as despicable, as unspeakable.
Violating her in a most callous and sadistic way. He compounded this further when he took photographs of his unspeakable mistreatment, which he kept as a vile trophy of his own inhumanity.
from somebody who had no remorse, who cared not for his victims, who cared not for their family and loved ones, who was only thinking of himself and what he could gain from this. Not only had Daniel Holdom killed Carly in Blanglow State Forest, he then took photos of her lifeless body as if this was some kind of trophy kill. And he kept those photos. He kept those photos on his device for years afterwards. He showed the photos of Carly's lifeless body to his ex-partner, to Hazel Passmore, and she said nothing.
We were happy that Holdom would never be released, and South Australia and Australia is a much safer place with him in prison.
This was a case that had crossed 3 state lines. It started in Northern Territory, it made its way through New South Wales, and it ended in South Australia. What was required to solve a case like this was incredible police work across 3 jurisdictions. It was really the work of the police in South Australia that had helped piece this mystery together. But the collaboration between jurisdictions that we saw here from police was really incredible work.
This investigation was enormous. We had over 2,000 reports to Crime Stoppers. We had 57 suspects that we identified. We identified 12,000 babies that were born in the relevant time frame to try to identify potential victims from that.
People like Tanya Webber, investigations couldn't be as successful as they are without that assistance, and we were appreciative of it.
Carly.
I do this for the families. As detectives, we speak for those who cannot speak.
Oh, my little star. You know, I wonder where
This was a job that touched the hearts of everybody across Australia.
I miss the freckles on your face. Look just like the Milky Way.
I've never been involved in my 50-odd years in the police with a job where there was so much investment from everybody in the community. Everybody wanted to solve this case. You saw roadside memorials. We had flowers delivered to our office. We had cards sent to our office. Yeah, it was just an outpouring of grief, I think, across the country and a sense of relief nationwide when he was arrested and convicted.